take it away, happy to do
Right.
so.
So if you would just go through it, we have.
Yep. All right. And I will just share my screen quickly. But yes, as you said at the outset, we have our longtime employee Lou Zullo, who was previously assistant town manager and personnel director or assistant town manager for human resources. The title has changed over the years, but you'll see that that's really the most fundamental change in this proposed job description. And again, consistent with the plan that we've been evolving over the last couple of years and the reorganization of that position into more of a classic HR director position and eventually department, as you just said, Sylvia, a standalone department. That's how we now break it out in the budget, which was new 2 budgets ago. And so now it has its own section. It's no longer in the town manager's office and town manager's section of the budget either. And so really the proposal here is to modernize this job description to reflect that change and that intent going forward for recruitment. So the new title, again, would take away any reference to assistant town manager and just formalize as a director of human resources in the human resources department. Again, right now that's a department of one, and I mentioned this to the council. I once we have somebody on board, and into the future, I could see the potential, depending on whether we're could still use some of these a swing position like we have now in the general services admin position, or a part-time or maybe even full-time administrative assistant for a more traditional HR department, because the variety and the complexity of what human resources deals with, it's not just any one thing. It's not personnel issues only. It's not labor relations only. It's not just benefits and health insurance and pension and onboarding and offboarding and recruitments and retention. It's all of the above. And it's something that you really want to get right as any organization, not just a town, because we are we're a heavily people-driven business. We're not manufacturing widgets. We are bringing in really good people, and we're trying to, recruit talent and continue to, operate as efficiently as we possibly can. So, I don't need to sell that part, I know, but, that part of the vision here is, and as with the office reorg that you referenced, moving economic development into this office has been extremely successful. And I see also the vision of having a robust HR department down the hall and a resource for both existing employees and prospective employees. So this really job description tunes up and reflects a lot of that intent. It's kept relatively generic. I mean, most people know what an HR director does. And so we want to keep some flexibility there. But again, mostly it's removing references to those assistant town manager or legacy assistant town manager duties that Lou also had previously. So you'll see elements of, this capacity here can step in for the town manager is taken out. And also there's some other components of purchasing and others that were previously removed as well. So here, section M, responsible for management of bids and RFQs. Again, that was just something that was in and probably a holdover from his assistant town manager role, and not something that you'd want the HR, or I would not want the HR director solely responsible for. Lastly, I would just add that, as the council knows, we've brought on different labor counsel at the council's support and approval. And we expect, while the HR director will always be involved in and helping to, cost out and provide resources and certainly a part of the team that's negotiating on behalf of management, the town's intention going forward is to have the person front and center and leading those negotiations be the attorney that we've contracted with for that purpose. So kind of removing that legacy complicated relationship of somebody who's both negotiating contracts and also helping to provide benefits and advice and other human resources functions. So that's probably it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions of any specifics that you have. And I'll just turn it back to you, Sylvia, if that's all right.
Yeah, well, I read through it. I'll look for some comments from Don and Peter, but I was amused at one of the sentences that we're asking to remove, which is that the equipment used in the office is a fax machine, a copier, and a calculator, and we're removing those things. Do we not use those anymore? So that means
I don't think we'll be in a position where someone says they can't use a calculator because it's not in their job description. But I like to think that it's part and parcel to functioning if needed. But yeah, some of it was really just cleaning up for more modern references to those important resources that somebody must have experience with. But otherwise, if we really had to, we could teach someone how to use the fax
You
machine.
think, okay.
We still have one. We have one associated with a copyright.
Well, it just shows how some of these job descriptions do need updating to this year, or at least this decade anyway. Peter or Don, do you have any questions? Don, right?
Yeah, just a couple things. First, I think it's smart to have the person do the negotiations with the attorney. Everyone's with the expertise anyway, who have done this, and it's hard to be negotiating contracts one day and the next day you're talking about benefits and how to support the employees another way. So it makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure most businesses feel that way as well. This position, I noticed it's a shared admin support, so there isn't going to be a specific admin for this person, correct? It's just going to be a shared.
So I didn't, this was what kind of a chicken and the egg situation where I considered, as I was preparing the budget for this next year, including an administrative support position dedicated to that department. But I kind of leaned on the side of letting that, I want that person to be part of the decision for how they would structure the office. Again, I would certainly expect and advise the council that down the line, even maybe in mid-year next year, but certainly by the next budget, I would expect to have that proposal and hear from the new person, whatever he or she feels is the kind of resource support that they need for their department. We are fortunate that we have an incredible, just dedicated employee and just a great person in that shared swing position that the council approved a few years ago. And that's somebody who Arnett helps manage their time through a calendar system, and departments can put in requests as a general services admin. They're a full-time person, but they're based in the planning department, which is just across the hall next to where the HR office is. She provides some support now on a kind of a project basis for Lou as needed, as does this office, which again is something that over time we'd like to get out of doing. But that was a legacy of really not when I moved Lou down the hall, there was no other administrative support immediately available. And historically, this office had that kind of shared function within it for the administrative team. But yes, the long answer there is I think we have enough resources to get through the initial, few months of them getting their feet under them and understanding the way the department works and how they can improve it. And then I'd be, open to hearing from them and would certainly tell them, frankly, through the interview process, there will be an opportunity here to try to build a robust traditional HR department. And we got to justify it. We got to explain why it's going to save money in the long run. And we're going to have, better operations for it. But that's correct. For now, a shared between that position, the swing general services position, and also, again, Noel and frankly, our office as support as needed in the short term.
So that makes sense in this end, but my only concern is because it is a new position, 6 months down the road, and you have this person in this new position, we need a budget, an admin, are they going to be swamped with work, or are we going to have to deal with that 6 months down the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure. And again, we certainly could, obviously we have another 5 weeks to approve the budget. I know we're usually at this stage trying to not add things to the budget. I'm not trying to do that, but I did consider adding a position. We're not talking about a ton of money in terms of half funding a position. I know we try not to do that, except this might be a really appropriate time to do that. If we said, hey, come January 1st, we've budgeted for, half of an administrative assistant position, that's $24,000 or whatever. And if we use it, it's there. If we don't need it, that's great. If you instead don't feel you need an administrative assistant, but you need a benefits analyst or something like that, well, we can talk about that too. Again, we've talked, and this committee's been very supportive that we've moved. I think a lot of modern departments are starting to move away from the traditional administrative assistant, the kind of classic secretarial clerical positions, and more to people that sometimes have a little higher skill sets or other more diverse skill sets, but also kind of take the place of that more fundamental basic support level. They can do both.
Right.
And we've seen that be successful with some of these specialist positions. So if a great opportunity came up to have a person that was an HR specialist, similar to the management specialist we have in this office, that would be something I'd like to have the new person, involved in developing. So.
Well, I mean, it's my hope that they are able to handle it with the support staff we have. Like all of us, none of us want to add any more money to the budget. We're trying to
No.
take away, but I mean, it's I just don't want the new person to be so overwhelmed that, after 6 months or a year, they're saying, I can't handle all of this,
Right.
But I guess, there will be, I mean, you'll be watching that closely, I'm sure. Your ideal candidate is it somebody who has past municipal experience, or are you looking for? I know, in the description, the desired, public admin bachelor's degree, and but I mean, maybe, or could it be somebody who has worked in business for many years as an HR expert?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, HR is one of those that certainly does cross. It's not exclusive to public, government in any way. The only exceptions to that really do come down to the public labor unions, in terms of, while this person may not be responsible for negotiating, the HR department is always going to be involved in, grievance procedures and
Right.
Enforcing of the contract. I mean, we're not going to the attorney for all of those things. So the HR, as you see in here, the HR has a clear role with respect to those employee relations. So I do think, if you've had somebody in the private sector who has had a lot of private sector union experience, there's a lot of crossover there. But somebody who maybe hasn't, who've had HR experience, but not in a unionized environment, might not fare as well head to head, at least with somebody who does have that. So but we keep our options open, and we'll see what we get.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Sean, two things. One is the title of the position. Just to be consistent, like what is Gary's title? Is he Director of Public Works or Public Works Director?
So it's funny. I grappled with that, and actually, that's partly why you see the two different deletes there, because I think one of those is my own edit to the job description. But Gary is the Director of Public Works and Engineering. So Director of is our more traditional name.
Okay.
So I did go with Director of Human Resources. I did look into that. The exceptions to that, of course, are the library director, just happens to be different, as opposed to Director of the library or Director of Library Services. Police chief is also the chief of police.
Yeah, that's different. I was thinking more of, Beth, Gary, Michelle.
Right.
Yeah, so Michelle is the Director of Social Services. Gary's the Director of Public Works and Engineering. John Golick is the Director of Recreation. So I think with those positions, as opposed to the chiefs, the Director of Human Resources is most appropriate. But I'm glad you pointed that out, because I grappled with it and tried to remember myself how best we can.
And
be
if you want to sneak Beth's then into one of our meetings, just as an aside, we can do that one real quick too.
Yeah.
I think it would that one's funny, because it would have to be of library. I think it would have to be of library services or something, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
The other one is more of a, now that we're moving into and certainly we've seen HR change over the years. Should there be something in the job description with regard to either privacy or cybersecurity, because of the sensitive information that this office handles?
That is I almost probably take that as a given, but it does not hurt to put it in there. I know
The second to last sentence in the desired knowledge kind of has it there. Must respect and maintain the confidentiality of sensitive documents and information.
I thought there was some,
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
took,
Don.
Don, I took
Okay.
that more of, if an employee comes in and sits down with you, that you're gonna keep
And
the conversation confidential, but they're dealing with social security numbers and the traditional PII that, is the buzzword nowadays.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that sentence should even be in knowledge, skills and abilities versus what their role is as a.
Role is, yeah,
Yeah, I
duties,
mean,
yeah,
the
duties and
function,
responsibilities.
I mean, it should be put in there that must maintain confidentiality of sensitive documents. Right?
Right.
That
And refer
that
to-
almost falls above that.
yeah, maybe we put that above desired knowledge in that bullet that's underlined, maybe the first sentence there, must respect and maintain confidentiality of sensitive documents and invitation. But right in the same line as the above duties describe the most significant duties that are performed. And certainly we could expand that, Peter, we could, if we approve this tonight with that sort of amendment, we can just expand that sentence to include the handling of sensitive material and in cyber, any sort of cyber related sensitivities more clearly than that. But we could put a draft in there if you're comfortable with that. I'm totally fine with that amendment. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, I
That
think
makes sense.
that doesn't hurt to be over cautious in those kinds of situations because sometimes it gets sensitive. I have a question about the salary range and that you were talking about an administrative assistant or a position there that perhaps would be added. This position, it is saving from Lou's position because it doesn't include the addition of the assistant town manager piece. So does that sort of balance out the need for that administrative assistant? Do we still?
So, yeah, it's a
about-
good question. Yeah, that's a great question. We've kept it at the same salary grade. I think it is the appropriate grade. It is the highest grade of E classification, but if you look at the other job and directors in that range, this is a highly responsible position, and I think it's an appropriate for what we would expect, and I think an appropriate range for folks that we would expect to attract to apply for this. The caveat, as you know, our ranges are very broad, and one of our goals down the line would probably be to tighten those up. They've evolved over time. There was a long time that I think we kept the floors really low, but then naturally increased it. So what we have here, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure the range for this position is like 190 to 160, right? So, 90 to 160.
Yeah.
So that,
I was gonna
we're not going to high. Yeah, I didn't mean 190. Apologies. Or it might even be 85,000. And so we're not going to hire an experienced human resources director for $85,000. So, or $90,000. It's going to be, you saw in the budget, I put a budget plug number of 125. I think that's a good target. As you said, it's significant savings over what the incumbent is making, just given their tenure and what's evolved over time there. So I think the range is appropriate. What I can't answer, of course, is if I get a fantastic candidate who comes in, who's going to solve all of our human resources problems for the next 20 years, and they won't take it for less than 129, I'm going to need to be able to offer them 129. You know what I mean? Like, we're in that flexibility I have given the range. The budget there, we just don't know right now what we're going to get. It's also possible we find somebody who's lower than 125. I've had 2 or 3 people call our office asking about the pay range because they're interested in the job. And I've told them just that, here's what I've put in the budget. It could be higher or lower, depends on your skills and experience. Encourage you to apply. And so we'll see. But yeah, I don't know for sure how much we're going to save until I see that person. But I'm confident it'll be savings over obviously the current position.
Okay. Any other questions, gentlemen? It's silent.
It sounds good to me. Everything sounds good with that change.
Yeah.
So we'll make that change, and assuming there's approval tonight, we'll make that edit and then circulate it, and then that will be what goes to the town council for approval. We'll make sure the 3 of you see it first, though.
Okay, so if did you officially just agree to move forward to the
I'll
council?
make a motion that we approve the position description for Director of Human Resources.
Yes.
With the changes that we added about moving one of the sentences up to, under essential functions and adding about cybersecurity.
I will second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. All those in favor, unanimous. So that was a good job. Then I would also request that we put that consideration of the change of other department titles into a next meeting of personnel, so we can consider specifically the library position, just changing the name of the director. So we can add that to the next agenda. If you have no objections, and if we are concluded and there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Good. Thank you. That was 22 minutes. We did
Aye.
very well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking